Ladies and gentlemen, this session is sponsored by DTE Energy. Please welcome Jerry Norcia, Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of DTE Energy.
Well, hello, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's Mackinac Policy Conference session. I'm delighted to see everyone here. It's been a long time since we've all been together, so thank you for joining us. I can't really think of a more timely discussion. So Civilian Advisory Committee to help bridge the gap between civilians and sworn members within the department. James White was named DPD as interim chief in June of 2021, following the retirement of Chief Craig. He was officially confirmed as chief in August of that same year. Chief White, who is a state licensed mental health counselor, said in a recent interview that his work as DPD chief is about running the department fairly, constitutionally, and being transparent. Welcome, Chief White. Our keynote speaker hardly needs an introduction. Mike Duggan has led an impressive turnaround in the city, which I know we're all grateful for. Before taking office, Mayor Mike Duggan was known as a leader capable of large-scale transformation, and he certainly has accomplished that at the city so far. I've personally watched him accomplish many things at the city, and we've worked together on several projects that I want to mention. And I mention these projects because it really shows you the man that's leading the city of Detroit through its transformation. So the very first project that we worked on together, when Mayor Duggan was elected, within a week of his election victory, he called me and said, Jerry, I'd really like to meet with you about the lighting system in the city of Detroit, which at that time was owned by the city of Detroit. And about 40 to 50% of the lights were not working at that time, and they were really old. So we sat together and he said, you know, I know that your team has been working on this for a year to try and help the city get moving. Why aren't you putting any lights up? I said, well, we've got a lot of barriers and a lot of bureaucracy that we need to get out of the way so that we can start putting lights up. He said, well, how fast do you think you can get the lights up? I said, well, I think we can get 90,000 lights up in about a year and a half. He said, well, what do you need me to do? So we talked about what needed to be done. He says, give me 30 days. And I thought, well, we'll see. But after 30 days, we got together again and he cleared all the barriers. And after that, he was like a dog on a bone, if you know Mayor Mike Duggan. He was all over this thing. He was meeting with me weekly with my team to understand progress. We were sending daily reports. And he wanted the best lighting system possible for the city of Detroit. He didn't want to settle for anything less. We could have done something that was more cheaper, but not as efficient. But we went with the best quality and the highest quality standard to really relight the city of Detroit. And it really was a historic project that we accomplished together, where we put over 80,000 lights up in a year and a half in a high quality way. So that was just a great accomplishment. The second was, during the first surge of COVID, a lot of the small businesses in Detroit shut down because of COVID for safety reasons, as you can imagine. Well, one of the things I didn't understand is about 50% of the people employed in the city of Detroit are from small businesses. So we really needed to help get the small business reopened in a safe way for customers and for the owners and for the employees in order to really restart the economy in the city of Detroit. And the mayor reached out and said, look, I know that a few of the corporations in the city have developed a tremendous amount of protocol on how to safely run your business, both for your employees and for your customers. Can you help these small businesses do this? So we got together with Rocket Mortgage and the mayor's team, and we really stood up a call center, like overnight. We stood up websites. We set up depots for safety equipment so that these small businesses could reopen with the right protocol to protect their employees and also protect their customers. And it's actually a program that continues today, which is working to enhance the competitiveness and success of small business in the city of Detroit. So just another great accomplishment, and it gives you an example of that. The last one that I'll talk about is the tablets in the city of Detroit. When the governor rightfully suspended in-person classes, about what we learned is that 95% of the students in the city of Detroit in the DPS system, Detroit Public School System, don't have access to an electronic device. So imagine the disadvantage that Detroit students would be at without the ability to learn virtually. So I got a call from my dear friend, Reverend Anthony, and we worked together and got together with Mayor Duggan to really start a massive initiative that we put together over a quick summer, the summer of 2020, to distribute 50,000 tablets to each DPS student in the city of Detroit. Huge accomplishment. And that I assure you would not have happened without the mayor intervening. A lot of Saturday phone calls, Sunday phone calls, all of that to make that a reality in quick order. So I give you these examples to let you know that the mayor is really about serving the people of Detroit with the fundamental services that they need. It's really about serving his citizens that he represents. So with that, join me in welcoming my dear friend, Mayor Duggan and Chief White. Thank you.
Please welcome Mike Duggan, Mayor of the City of Detroit, James White, Chief of the Detroit Police Department. And to moderate the discussion, contributor at One Detroit and DBTV, host of WDET 101.9 FM, and founding editor of BridgeDetroit, Stephen Henderson.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to start with the chief because he's the new person up here. Chief, so you and I have talked over the years about a lot about policing, and you've been a member of the department. I know you're somebody who had lots of ideas about how things might be different or might be better. So walk me through the decision to accept the chief's job. Why do you take it? And what are reasonable goals that you might set for the department?
Well, I retired, as you know, in 2020. Took a job with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights at a time when it wasn't anticipated that a police assistant chief would get a job doing civil rights in the state. Very honored to have that opportunity to do that important work. Very humbled for that opportunity, and we did a lot of good things in that short year that I was there. But I got a call from the mayor. And those of us who have received calls from the mayor know that he can be quite convincing. We had a conversation about how retirement was going. He advised me that Chief Craig had retired and he'd like to have dinner. And we had dinner, we had a conversation. He says to me, all you have to do is quit the job that you have, that you like, take a job with no guarantees, be my interim chief, and work hard to be selected by the Board of Police Commissioners and City Council with no guarantees. So I said, well, Mayor, I don't know about that. I mean, I'm retired and I got this job. And he says, you need to believe in yourself. And, and so from there, I believed in myself and took the opportunity. And I'm really honored and humbled to lead this department of amazing men and women that put their lives on the line day in and day out for strangers. And they are modern day heroes, and they do amazing work. And it really is a highlight of my career to lead them, particularly in this time. And when you talk about expectations, you know, we are a data-driven agency. We are an educated agency. With the help of the mayor, we've put together some professional development for our command team with the Mike Ilitch School of Business at Wayne State. A number of my command team of MBAs, and I myself went through the Mike Ilitch School of Business. And it really did change the dynamic in how we look at policing.
So, Mr. Mayor, put policing and crime, I guess, in the context of your overall strategy for leading the city and keeping people safe.
Well, there's no question about it. If you don't feel safe, everything else comes apart. And we've had an issue of violence in the city for decades. But if you look at what's happened in America, since COVID, and we've studied it, violent crime has soared. You've had shootings, homicide double, some states triple. And what Chief White and I are very much data-driven. There is no question what is causing the post-COVID violence. It's that the court shut down. There are no jury trials, which means that prisoners backed up into jail. We had COVID in jail, so they released prisoners. I don't know what we've got, probably a couple of thousand out on tethers today. And what is happening is people who have been charged with gun crimes, people you know in the neighborhood, that the cops caught. They got caught on a gun crime, and they're still walking the streets 2 years later. You're starting to think, I need to carry a gun myself for protection. And so what's happened across this country is a lot of folks are carrying guns that didn't want to carry guns, and now every single interpersonal conflict is turning into violence. We aren't seeing drug turf wars, the kind of things we'd have seen 20 years ago. That's not what we're seeing. And so what the chief and I have done, and we speak the same language, the key to reducing crime is not to arrest people and lock them up, it's to change decisions. The moment that individual sticks the gun under their waistband and walks out of the house in the morning, we've lost because something's going to happen. And so everything we are doing is saying to people, leave the gun at home. And what you have seen, and we were just at the White House because Detroit is down so far this year, it's the end of May, 20% in homicides and shootings from a year ago. We stand out in the country. Every chief in America is talking to us. Now, Chief White doesn't like me talking about this because summer's coming and nobody declares victory before summer's coming. But the fact is that steps that this department has taken to get people to make different decisions is making a difference. And if we can build on it, and the courts are being cooperative, Prosecutor Worthy is being cooperative, Dawn Eisen in the U.S. Attorney's Office has been phenomenal in this strategy. It's going to get better and better. I really feel that, and I feel that the way this chief has this department going, we're going to be okay.
Yeah. This is I guess, a bigger picture question, Mr. Mayor, and it's about how much we can rely on policing to solve our crime problem, and how much has to be policing in concert with or other things instead of policing. How does that fit together?
So you're absolutely right. So my first year here, you had DTE and GM and a few people running summer jobs programs. We got them all together with the help of a number of foundations. We now have what JP Morgan has called the finest summer jobs program in America, 8,000 young people. The first year we went to 8,000 young people in summer jobs, shootings dropped over the summer. Is that coincidence or is that not? I think opportunity is a very significant thing. The second thing that Harvard did research on is that the areas that were filled with blight and abandoned houses had higher degrees of shooting. The places where we cleared out the abandoned houses saw reductions in crime. Of course, we've landed things like 5,000 good-paying jobs at the Jeep plant, 2,000 more at the General Motors plant. We've got folks employed. And so you've got to do two things at once. One is you have to have a path where people feel there is a prospect for their own success that's within the right side of the law. And then you have to, these individuals are making risk-reward decisions. It is amazing how precise as you talk to them, and I spend time with gang members as the chief does, they're making very conscious risk-reward decisions. And what we have to do, and this is what the chief is a big proponent of, is make it very difficult for you to succeed in committing a crime with a gun, and make it much easier for you to succeed in another way. And literally everything we do all day is planning how to change those incentives and disincentives.
Yeah. Chief, you released a 5-point plan for policing the city. Talk about that plan and talk about how that might look different from what we were doing before.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about using data to drive our resources. You know, you can't arrest your way out of crime. You've got to be innovative. You've got to use technology. You've got to do deployment. You've got to look at ways of policing smarter. The kids, I call them the kids, but you know they're using technology now to get around what we're doing. They're using Instagram. You know, we've got a drifting and drag racing problem where you know the drag racers and the drifters are picking parts of our community to come out, endanger their community with these vehicles, driving, you know, very recklessly, and using social media, which has no culpability, by the way, but that's a whole nother conversation, to talk about, let's get in these areas, let's do this behavior, let's get these likes, and you know, let's make money off of these likes, which we've just found out. But we've got a real-time crime center. And with that real-time crime center, we've got civilian analysts who are super smart They use our technology. They get into these chat groups, private groups. In fact, most recently we had one where the kids were meeting up, and we had gotten a little ahead of the curve and somewhat sophisticated in how we were tracking them. Well, they got even more sophisticated. So they started charging for the maps that they were going to drag race. Well, we had our analysts buy the app and pay and go in and infiltrate that group. So we would be there waiting on them. And so we have to be smart. We have to deploy our 5-point plan with that in mind, that there, as the mayor indicated, some of these criminals are smart. I mean, if they did something else for a living, they would be very successful business people. They just choose to break the law. So they're using innovation and technology to not be arrested. And so our strategy focuses on really the key areas that we're struggling with, or what's struggling with. Not that we're declaring victory by any means, but we've had some degree of success. And one of the things is crowd control and crowd management. When I walked in last year, we had an uptick of 44% of non-fatal shootings, and that was a problem. And we knew that people are bringing guns to areas where people congregate. They would have very simple conflict, resolve it with a gun. You bump into me, you step on my shoes, I'm going to shoot you. Impulse decision making. So what we decided to do was to look at those areas, pinpoint where the high likelihood were in our communities, and deploy in those communities where there was a likelihood of the behavior happening. We had some success with that. We took a lot of guns off the street. But again, with the courts being closed, it's a turnstile. They go into the court system. Many of them get a tether. They walk right out the door and engage in similar behavior. So, we were able to do some things. The other issue, or the other area that we decided to focus on besides drag racing, was just general traffic enforcement. When you see officers in communities doing traffic stops, you see those lights on, it changes behavior, it changes decision making. Another component was to make sure that we focused on not just arresting, but giving people additional opportunities to do something different. So we deployed a layered approach with our ceasefire. Detroit ceasefire is one of the most successful ceasefires in the country. We get a lot of accolades and a lot of visits from around the country. And what that is in a nutshell is really giving people who have been identified by us as either likely to be victims of gun crime or likely to commit gun crimes. Oftentimes they are gang members, oftentimes they are ex-gang members. And what we found recently is many of them are generational gang members, which means dad was a gangbanger and his dad was a gangbanger. And so a lot of the kids are finding their way to gang activity because of the historical components to gang activity. So what we try to do is disrupt that flow or disrupt that pipeline by giving them additional opportunities. There's a number of jobs in the city for some of the kids that are returning citizens. We're finding ways to employ them, get their GEDs, get educated, get other opportunities, and really just change the direction and the course of their lives. Unfortunately, that's not going to work for everybody. So you have to have an effective strategy for enforcement, deployment, and another component of the 5-point plan is that deployment. Making sure that those people who are likely to pull triggers don't get an opportunity to do so and victimize our community. And if they do, make the arrest constitutionally and disrupt the activity that they're involved in. If they are with gangs and they are gang banging, then you disrupt every aspect of that gang. Everybody that they touch, everybody that they hang out with, you visit and you talk to. One really strong piece of this is we have a piece of it where we bring them in for call-ins. And what we do is we have a meeting. We get about 30 or 40 of the people that we've identified in the room, and it's very powerful. In fact, the last couple that we've had over half the people take services. And in that room, you have clergy, you have people who have been victimized by gang violence, people who have been victimized by gun violence, and a number of resources, all in the same room. We feed them, we break bread with them, we talk about opportunities, but we also tell them transparently that if you don't change your behavior, you're going to get the undivided attention and force of this police department. And also, we talk to them about the collaboration that we have with the FBI, the ATF, and that this is a serious issue. And it does pay dividends. It does work.
Yeah. I want to go back to what the mayor was saying about murders being down so far. but maybe we're a little nervous about declaring victory before the summer. Chief, what do you worry about with a Detroit summer and the threat?
Yeah, I mean, by no means are we declaring victory. One homicide, one mother crying over a dead child is one too many. Do we look at what we've done and see what's working? What do we need to double down our efforts? Yes, we do that daily, twice a day, in fact. But by no means are we going to look at, a reduction in homicides of 15-20% and say that we've solved our crime problem. We have a significant violent crime problem in our community, and we're going to continue to drive it. What do I worry about? I worry about gun violence in our community. I worry about people being the victims of senseless gun violence. I grew up at a time when you had a fight, you punched, and yeah, that was bad enough. But now we're ending our lives by pulling a trigger. And not only are you victimizing the person that you're shooting, you're victimizing yourself because it's over. You've just made an impulse decision to end the life of somebody over something that you could get over. I mean, this shouldn't result in a homicide or shooting. And then now you have to suffer the consequences in your family. So the messaging for us is to make different decisions. But what I worry about is the children. The children, like baby Bryson, who was shot on the freeway in our community, who was coming home from a basketball game with mom and dad, and his brother. Knucklehead misidentifies the car. He's actually having a problem with another person that's not in that car, but the car is similar to the person he's having a problem with. And he shoots into the car. He kills baby Bryson and shoots baby Bryson's brother. That's what I worry about. How do we stop that?
So how do we stop it? I mean, we hear a lot about community policing, the different kind of approaches to policing. What are some of the levers you feel like you can pull?
So we're at the cutting edge of trying a lot of things. And I'll just give you an example. What we've done is we know that the block parties late in the evening, frequent shootings. Clubs get out, 1:30, 2:30 a.m., frequent shootings. We know where these places are, and what Chief White has done is deploy officers there. I think that's been a factor, but here's how far we've gone. There is a metal detector system that's been used at a number of sports stadiums and malls that you don't have to stop and take your phone out or take your hat off. It spots the shape of a gun. And I saw this, and they're out in Boston, and I thought, these guys are doing this all wrong. Where we need these kinds of metal detectors is out on the streets. It's at the block parties in the neighborhood. So I got on a plane, flew out to Boston. And I said, guys, your business model is wrong. You want to be outside. They said, what do you mean? I said, well, we could be in Greektown. We could be out on the fireworks. We could be at neighborhood block parties. We could be at parks. We can deploy these things outside. People can walk through and flow through. And when the shape of a gun goes off, officer will come up and say, do you have your concealed carry permit? If you do, you go on about your business. If you don't, you're going to be arrested. Evolve modified their program. We've just bought 10 of them, started deploying them. And these are the kinds of things we want to do. We are saying to people ahead of time, before you go to that block party, you're going to have to go through this weapons detector. We don't want to arrest you. We're telling you ahead of time it's going to be there. Leave your gun at home. Anything that we can do to cause people to change decisions. Last year on Greektown, and the police department knows, I don't want to hear about your brilliant arrest, because we got great cops, great detectives. Show me that you're changing decisions. They came into one meeting and they had a TikTok video. I don't even know what TikTok is. But the police play me this TikTok video, and somebody is in Greektown talking about all these creepy cops up on the tower and over here and over here. This place is getting really bad for us. We got to go to a different location in the suburbs. That's changing decisions. And so that's what we're expecting, and that's what we're looking for.
I'm going to talk a little about the force itself. That's always been an issue here in Detroit, keeping enough officers employed. Mr. Mayor, how are we doing with that? We can always use more. We lose officers to a number of different things, but we've lost a lot. You were saying when we were talking about this, to retirement, which is producing a different challenge, I guess, for you guys.
So the last 2 years, we basically have lost an average of 20 officers a month and graduated 20 officers from the academy a month. And so it's been a wash as far as the size of the force. But at any given time, we've got 100 or 200 vacancies. And so we have raised pay, we've improved recruiting. Chief White can talk about the recruiting. Our police force has gotten younger. And it is amazing. We've had a couple of officer-involved shootings, cases where one officer heroically went into gunfire, pulled another officer to safety. He's been on the job 18 months. And you look at, number one, the quality of the officers we're hiring, the quality of training at the academy. It's very impressive. But the fact is, the chief knows he's got to graduate 30 a month, not 20 a month to gain on the program. And you can talk about what you're doing to accomplish that.
Yeah, we just entered into an agreement with Wayne County Community College. We're doing a lot of collaboration to recruit, and it's a problem that's around the country. I mean, it's not just Detroit. There was a big hire in 2000, big hire in the 90s. A lot of those officers are coming up on retirement. People are making different decisions about law enforcement, what's happening with law enforcement around the country. So it's a challenge to recruit, but we're getting caliber officer, technologically savvy. Certainly not necessarily what we're seeing in our younger group, officers that are committed to 25 years. And that's not just because of policing. What we're seeing with a lot of the Generation X and Yers, that they are making different decisions. They're not staying long term. They're doing 20 years, 15 years, but they're not doing the 25 and 30 like me and others that have done in law enforcement. So we've got some challenges, but we're looking at them a little bit different. As I talked about earlier, with using just a business mindset of running the police department, we understand the importance of collaboration. We understand the importance of recruiting differently. We're on Indeed and websites such as that. We're working with other partners. As I was talking about with Wayne County Community College, we've got a dual track program where students are able to compete or complete their last year of high school while attending and obtaining their associate's degree. So when they come into the police academy, they've got an associate's degree. And so that program is just launched and is moving in the right direction. And we're hiring right now, by the way, if anybody is interested or knows anyone.
Well, I'll give you a sense of this chief who comes off as very calm and relaxed here. But he's been intense on this, and nothing is more valuable than if you can hire people with military experience as police officers. There's a level of maturity that's even better. And he finally got fed up with his department and not bringing enough veterans. He said, I want somebody at goddamn Metro Airport, and when they get off the plane at their end of the tour of duty, I want the recruiter waiting for him at the gate. I don't know if he's quite accomplished that, but that's the level of commitment you have from this chief to recruit quality officers.
Yeah. So let's talk about technology. You guys have a lot going on in terms of incorporating technology into policing in Detroit, and some, I guess, high-profile things that have come online.
Yeah. I mean, and technology is important, and we're here. We're not going backwards, and we have to be on the cutting edge in order to fight crime. We've got a situation right now with Operation Zion. This is a young girl who was murdered, and we're pretty confident who murdered her. And I want to thank DTE. We reached out and asked them, talking about that collaboration, for some help. And $20,000 later, they gave us what we needed to start to dig at a dump site. For Zion. So thank you, DTE, for that. But it's using technology even for that. At the very basic level, we were downtown last weekend, and we see a guy, and he is just not wanting to talk, cooperate, or anything. So the officers did a really good job of saying, hey, you need to leave. You're causing the disruption. Why don't you go ahead and get in your car and leave? I'm not going anywhere with, blah, 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 blah. So the officers did a good job of asking him, then they told him, and then they took him. So they made an arrest. So he gets in the car, they ask him his name, he gives them a name, they pull out the fingerprint reader. They put the fingerprint reader on his thumb, put it on his finger, index finger, and it comes back with 2 felony warrants. And he goes, how do you know my name? Well, if this was 10, 15 years ago, we wouldn't have known his name, and he would have used someone else's name. That person would have likely been charged with the crime that he was charged with, and he would have walked with 2 felonies. And one of the felonies was AWIM, and so that's or assault with intent to murder. So that's a big warrant. Yeah. So we got him off the street. so that's how technology helps us. With the Zion case, that's how technology helps us. Our cameras, Greenlight, our public-private partnership with Greenlight, phenomenal. It's changing behavior. It's making people make different decisions. Now we're seeing an uptick in freeway shootings. Well, they're being pushed from parking lots and gas stations. We saw a significant uptick in carjackings at gas stations. Those numbers are declining. What's increasing? We can see that freeway shootings are increasing. Why is that happening? Technology. It's pushing behavior. It's making people make different decisions. Now we need to get in front of that because let's face it, crime has no borders, right? I mean, you get on the freeway, you're going 80 miles an hour, someone's shooting into your car, you're not going to pause to look at a plate number and a vehicle description. You're going to try to save yourself. And the criminals know that. So we have to advance and get on the freeways and get that information.
I give you a sense of how sophisticated they are. They showed me a horrifying video of a woman going into her home beaten to death. Guy with the mask covered, the car was too far away to read the license plate, went to the car and drove off. Normally, no chance. The Detroit Police Department looked at all the gas stations in the surrounding areas, found one where the person with the identical dress, without his mask on, got some gas, went into the store, got his face, got the picture of his actual car and the license plate, went and arrested him. He was astonished. He'd committed the crime with a mask. But what this police department does with a lot of civilian investigators, we're taking officers off the streets, is we are solving cases that in another time would never have been solved. And so everything they do, Chief White brought me a plan, 5 years ago for about a $3 million real-time crime center. And I said to him, there's no business plan here. How are you going to use it to fight crime? Why is $3 million the right number? I gave him a really bad time. And instead of being discouraged, he came back 30 days later with a long, detailed plan on all the different ways we could intervene to reduce violence, but he wanted $10 million. So I made two decisions that day. The first was I gave him the $10 million, and the second was I decided if the day ever came up, this was our police chief. And both came true.
Thank you.
So all the technology you guys are talking about here is surveillance technology. And at BridgeDetroit, we hear from some Detroiters that they feel over surveilled. We don't hear from everybody, but there are people who question how much we are being watched in Detroit and whether that is itself an issue. How do you answer that?
Well, our surveillance is in public areas. You walk into a gas station before, there was a security camera there. The difference is now it is a Greenlight camera that goes right to DPD headquarters where you can see it in real time, but we're not going into the privacy of your home. What we have done is get very sophisticated. ShotSpotter is absolutely fascinating. We've got an area of the east side, high violence area, and what it does is it recognizes the sound of gunfire. It's got no cameras, got no surveillance, but it tells you exactly where a gunshot came off. So instead of somebody calling 911, I'm hearing gunshots in the neighborhood, cops circling around, you go precisely to that point. And so one of the first days we had it, they get the message, they go out, there's a bunch of casings on the ground, but there's no people around outside the house. Had somebody called and said, I heard gunfire, you wouldn't know where it came from. They go up to the house, knock on the door, don't get an answer, they get a warrant because of the casings. They go inside and find that house is making ghost guns you can assemble from parts, and they go into the backyard and shooting the gun up to test them out after they've assembled them. We make arrests and clean out the ghost guns. Why did we get it? Because we use the technology of ShotSpotter. I don't know anybody in this city who thinks it's intrusive that when somebody's firing guns in the air, the police respond to the right site. And so I feel very good about the fact that, no question, we have taken the sophistication of public surveillance to an area where we're making cases, but I'm in neighborhood meetings all the time. People in Detroit are overwhelmingly in favor of that.
Mm-hmm.
It really the same. I mean, it's interesting, we get a lot of people being concerned about it, and rightfully so. But with us, it's about the policy that we have with our surveillance technology. And we're not surveilling, right? We have the public-private partnership with Greenlight, and that's voluntary. And they push that video to us. But what's interesting is I just had a some criticism recently about not using facial recognition on a B&E. There was a citizen who was B&E 3 times, and their criticism was, use facial rec. Well, no, our policy is very restrictive. It's Part 1 violent crime only. We're not using it for B&E. Now, had you been home when the B&E happened, then that brings it up to a level that does trigger our policy execution and where we can use it. So, the key, again, is constitutional policing, strict policy, and really no room for anyone who violates that policy. And we submit a very transparent documentation to the Board of Police Commissioners, who review it every single week, about how many apprehensions we've made using facial rec technology and any surveillance technology that we use. The other thing about ShotSpotter that really is powerful, I've been on a number of crime scenes, but one that happened over the winter was a mother, her boyfriend, and her 5-year-old son, who was murdered in a home in Northwest Detroit. And that evening when they were murdered, the neighbors heard the gunshots. And we asked them many times, why did you not call the police? Why didn't you call the police? And one of the neighbors said, well, we hear gunshots a lot. But we never want our community to be desensitized by gunfire. This isn't a car alarm. You hear a car alarm and hope someone turns it off. When you hear a gunshot, this is a violent situation. Someone is likely being injured, or someone's attempting to injure someone. And oftentimes when we are out on ShotSpotter calls, we see, that someone's exactly doing that, but we're also now starting to see people who are coming outside and, quote, testing their new weapon out. Mm-hmm. And we're able to go in, secure the weapon, use NIBIN. Most recently, we had a case on the east side where we found a number of shell casings. We brought in the ATF. They did a dog sweep. We found more shell casings, and we were able to put those shell casings into NIBIN and connect that with 2 crimes and ultimately make an arrest and get a violent perpetrator off the streets. So that's what technology does, and that's how you can use it to help your community.
And what's happened to the shootings in the 9th precinct since you put ShotSpotter in?
They've gone down significantly. And the instances
people are making different decisions. Those guys know ShotSpotter is in that area, right?
Oh, absolutely. And then when you come in and you bring in resources in that layered approach, where you've got the ATF, you're using NIBIN, you've got those civilian analysts that are coming out and putting those rounds in the NIBIN, it literally is changing behavior in the 9th precinct. They're making different decisions. We're seeing the numbers go down, and we don't have those random incidents of gunfire.
Yeah. So we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I do want to talk about ARPA funds and how they can and should be used, I guess, to make generational differences, I guess, in policing. You've talked a lot, Mr. Mayor, about how we can't just squander this money on things that are one-time issues. We want to spend it in a way that changes things. How are you doing that?
So I'll let the chief talk about the actual enforcement side, but we're putting $100 million into training programs, things we call Skills for Life. And I'll just give you an example. I spend time with gang members as the chief. We want to figure out the crime problem. Sitting around talking to each other in a room doesn't do any good. I'm talking to this guy who says, I just got out of prison on a federal racketeering charge. I got no job. I'm making, and these guys will tell you this, I'm making $15 an hour basically selling drugs on the corner, and I'm looking over my shoulder every minute. If you can get me into a job that's better than that, I'll take it. I make a phone call, get him to a concrete company that does business with the city of Detroit, $16 an hour, get him to work the next week, hard worker learning it. After a month, he can't go because they switched job sites. He doesn't have a driver's license because they didn't pay his fees. Now we had to send a lawyer out to district court to work out his traffic tickets, to get that solved. So now he's got his driver's license, he's still working. What we're finding in our program, our ceasefire program, is we can change these patterns, and we're going to put $100 million into raising skill levels, training, so that people have a lifetime of a good income instead of those other choices. We're going to combine that with the things the chief is doing, which he can tell you about.
Yeah, and again, it's a layered approach, and I keep saying it, but when you look at the collaboration we've got with city government, right? I mean, and some of those programs that the mayor just talked about, it does help with crime. Because now when we go into these communities with our CIT program, which is our crisis intervention training, and we've got officers in now 6 precincts and hopefully 12 by the end of the year, at least 10, but I'm really pushing for 12 to have all our precincts covered. You've got officers that are trained in mental health. You've got a mental health practitioner on the car. You've got a mental health practitioner at 911. So when that customer or that client calls that's in need of services, they can talk them through. And we're seeing the dividends pay significantly on that. On our barricaded gunmen, or barricaded gun people now, because we have as many women as men, that are out there, we're able to talk them down and not have to use force. We're also, with the layered approach, when you go into these communities and you do enforcement, it's important that you leave something. It's important that you're able to bring other services. No one has ever declared victory on arrest, which means that regardless of how good your policing strategy is, you're never going to get to the point where someone's not willing to make a bad decision and go to jail. So what else can you do? What are the other factors that drive crime? Well, environmental. So when you've got the demolition team that I can pick up the phone and say, look, I've been in this block 3 times, there's an abandoned house where people are hanging out, and you've got LaJuan Counts coming out with her team and knocking the house down. Or like I had a problem downtown with a business, a very problematic business who shall remain nameless, but they're open 24 hours, 7 days a week. That business, we are now working with our law department to get them, get some attention from them to do their part in keeping the community safe. But public lighting came in and lit the place up. It looks like a ball field now. So we didn't have an incident over there last weekend. So when you can tap into those services, we got DPD TV, and I've got Vicki Thomas on the mayor's public information team that's able to support us in that and get this information out. I mean, many of us remember when the mayor was a prosecutor and he ran something called John's TV. Well, we adopted that idea and we're flipping it, and now we're highlighting all criminals and the activities that they do. So when you use your ARP dollars wisely, you invest in the community, you bring programs like the CIT mental health program, you will see an impact in crime.
Yeah. Okay, that's our time.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor Duggan.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.